The morning shift at Ruby's Diner began like any other Tuesday in October. Sarah wiped down the red vinyl booths with practiced efficiency, her movements slow and deliberate. The autumn sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting golden streaks across the checkered linoleum floor. The familiar smell of coffee and bacon grease hung in the air, comforting in its predictability. Sarah had worked at Ruby's for 3 years now, ever since she moved to Portland after her divorce. The diner sat on a quiet corner of the city, surrounded by modest apartment buildings and small businesses. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and gave her something to focus on, besides the loneliness that sometimes crept in during the quiet evening hours. She tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock. 7:30. In the morning meant the breakfast rush would start soon. Regular customers would filter in, ordering their usual combinations of eggs, toast and coffee. Sarah knew most of their names and preferences by heart. Mrs. Patterson liked her coffee black with 2 sugars. Mr. Chen always ordered the same blueberry pancakes with extra syrup. The bell above the door chimed as her first customer of the day entered. Sarah looked up from refilling the sugar dispensers, expecting to see one of her regulars. Instead, a woman in scrubs hurried through the door, her face flushed and urgent. "Excuse me," the woman called out, slightly breathless. "I'm from Portland General Hospital, just down the street. We have an emergency situation and desperately need O-negative blood donors. Is anyone here willing to help?" The diner fell quiet. The few early customers looked up from their newspapers and coffee cups, expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Sarah felt her heart skip slightly. She knew her blood type was O-negative because she'd donated before, back when she was married, and had more time for community activities. "I'm O-negative," Sarah said quietly, setting down the sugar dispenser. "But I'm supposed to work until 3 o'clock today." The nurse's eyes lit up with relief. "Please, it would only take about an hour. We have a patient who was in a serious car accident early this morning. He's lost a lot of blood and we're running critically low on his type." Sarah glanced around the diner. It wasn't particularly busy yet, and her manager Ruby was understanding about emergencies. The thought of someone's life hanging in the balance while she served pancakes and poured coffee felt wrong somehow. "Okay," she said, untying her apron. "Let me just tell my boss." Ruby emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her hands. When Sarah explained the situation, the older woman nodded without hesitation. "Go help," she said simply. "I can handle the morning crowd." The walk to Portland General took only 5 minutes. Sarah had passed the hospital countless times on her way to work, but had never been inside. The sterile smell of disinfectant and the soft beeping of medical equipment created an atmosphere entirely different from the warm familiarity of the diner. The donation process was routine. Sarah lay on a comfortable chair while the nurse, whose name was Jennifer, prepared the equipment. They made small talk about the weather and the changing leaves, but Sarah's mind kept drifting to the unknown patient who needed her blood. "Can you tell me anything about him?" Sarah asked as the needle found her vein. Jennifer checked the tubes and bags, her expression professional but kind. "Car accident victim. He's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while. Your donation, along with a few others we've managed to collect, should help get him through the worst of it." Sarah watched the deep red liquid flow through the clear tubing. It seemed strange to think that something from her body could help save a complete stranger's life. The idea gave her a quiet sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. After the donation, Jennifer offered her juice and cookies in the recovery area. Sarah sat for the required 15 minutes, feeling slightly lightheaded but satisfied. When she finally returned to Ruby's diner, the lunch rush was just beginning. The next few weeks passed normally. Sarah fell back into her routine of early mornings, friendly customer service, and evening walks through her neighborhood. She occasionally wondered about the accident victim, but assumed he had recovered and moved on with his life. Portland was a big city, and their paths were unlikely to cross. On a Thursday afternoon in November, Sarah was refilling the coffee machine when she noticed a man in an expensive-looking grey suit sitting in the corner booth. He seemed out of place among the usual crowd of construction workers and office employees. His dark hair was neatly styled, and despite the casual setting, he carried himself with quiet confidence. When Sarah approached to take his order, she was struck by his eyes. They were a warm brown, but there was something familiar about them that she couldn't quite place. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, pulling out her notepad. He smiled, and something in his expression seemed almost nervous. "Actually, I was hoping to talk to you, Sarah. My name is Michael Chen." Sarah blinked in surprise. The name was familiar, but she couldn't immediately remember why. "Do we know each other?" Michael's hands rested on the table, and she noticed a thin scar running along his left wrist. "Not exactly, but you saved my life about a month ago." The realization hit her slowly. The blood donation. You were the patient from the car accident. "I was," he said quietly. "I wanted to find you and thank you personally, but the hospital couldn't give me your information. It took some detective work to track you down." Sarah sat down across from him, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "I'm glad you're okay. You look like you've recovered well." "I have, thanks to you and the other donors. But there's something else I wanted to discuss with you." Michael paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I own a foundation that focuses on healthcare access and blood donation awareness. After my accident, I realized how critical these programs are and how many people don't know about the constant need for donors." Sarah listened, intrigued, but not sure where the conversation was heading. "I'd like to offer you a position with the foundation," Michael continued. "Director of Community Outreach. The job would involve organizing donation drives, speaking at schools and community centers, and helping people understand how simple it is to save lives." The offer hung in the air between them. Sarah felt her heart racing, not from attraction, but from the sudden possibility of meaningful work. "I don't have experience in that kind of thing." "You have something more valuable than experience," Michael said. "You have the instinct to help when help is needed. The rest can be learned." Sarah looked around the diner, at the familiar booths and the coffee-stained counter. It had been her refuge for 3 years, a safe place to rebuild her life after. Everything fell apart, but Michael's offer represented something different, a chance to make a real difference. "The salary would be significantly more than what you're making here," Michael added. "And you'd have health insurance, retirement benefits, and the resources to create real change in people's lives." That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at Michael's business card. She had always been cautious about big changes, preferring the security of routine, but something about the opportunity felt right, like a path she was meant to follow. The next morning, she called the number on the card. Michael answered on the second ring, and she could hear the smile in his voice when she accepted his offer. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of a group of high school students, explaining how a simple blood donation could save up to 3 lives. Behind her, a banner displayed the logo of the Chen Foundation for Healthcare Access. She had found her calling in the most unexpected way, through an act of kindness that she had almost forgotten about. After the presentation, as students lined up to register as future donors, Sarah thought about the strange chain of events that had led her here. A random Tuesday morning, a nurse in scrubs, and a willingness to help a stranger had completely changed the direction of her life. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with the smallest acts of compassion she had learned. And sometimes, when you give a piece of yourself to help someone else, you discover that you've actually found yourself in the process. The afternoon sun streamed through the school windows, warm and golden, just like that morning at Ruby's diner when everything began to change.